think it might be working. I'll know in a minute.
It looks like it is.
It takes a second. All right. Good morning. This is Sally Flashberger from the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, and we're here for another Living Well Wednesday. We're excited to have an expert with us on MAPP, and so I'm going to turn it over to Shannon. She's one of our great partners on our Living Well grant, and she's going to get us started and enjoy.
Yeah.
If you have questions, post them in the chat or on Facebook in the comments, and we will answer all your questions.
Thanks, Sally. So some of you may or may not be aware that for a number of years, there was a lot of advocacy around making some changes to the Medicaid purchase plan and some of the rules for that to make it a more accessible, attractive program for people who are working to get Medicaid and also save a little bit more money than they typically would do with SSI or supplemental security income. So we're excited to say that the advocates' work has paid off, and the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities really wants to get some information about these Medicaid purchase plan or MAPP changes, out to service providers, people, their families, care managers, you name it, because it really does. There's some really great changes that have happened with the MAPP program. So with that, we have a benefits specialist, a work incentive benefits specialist from ERI. Her name is Megan Koch, and she has been doing a lot of the work around the MAPP changes and whatnot. We also have a self-advocate, David Pino, who will be joining us. He worked hard on, talking with legislators, talking with the Department of Health Services, about the needed changes with the MAPP program. He's also a person who uses the MAPP program because he's working and earning wages and is utilizing the MAPP program in order to, get his Medicaid as well as earn and save a little bit more than he typically would do with just the Medicaid through SSI. So with that, I will hand it over to Megan, who will talk us through some of the changes with the MAPP program, as well as what the MAPP program is for those of you who aren't familiar with it and its features. So thanks so much, Megan, for joining us.
Thank you, Shannon. And thanks for having me today. I am very excited to talk to you some more about the MAPP program. But again, my name is Megan Cook, and I am from ERI, or Employment Resources. And as Shannon,
sorry, I pronounced that wrong, Megan.
Hey, no worries. I'm very, very used to that. As Shannon mentioned, I am a work incentive benefits specialist, or a WIBS. And so I have the opportunity to talk to people about their work goals and their career goals. And MAPP is a really great program that I get to talk to people about because it offers a lot of people the opportunity to work and have more income and more savings and maintain their Medicaid. And we'll talk a lot more about all of those things. I'm going to try and share my screen here, if I can find the right screen. Are you all looking at a PowerPoint right now, hopefully?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. All right. So MAPP stands for the Medicaid Purchase Plan. And we'll talk all about the ins and outs of what that means. And we're gonna, kind of dig in so that you have a better understanding of, who it's for. But it's a really great program. So I hope that you learned something today, maybe that you didn't know. And also, if you have questions throughout, put them in the chat, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask if you are here in the Zoom room. And if stuff does pop up in the chat or on Facebook, you guys should interrupt me and let me know. All right. Yeah. So what is MAPP? Let's start out with just a quick definition of what it even is. Why do you even care? So MAPP, which stands for the Medicaid Purchase Plan, is a program that gives people in Wisconsin the opportunity to access full coverage Medicaid. It's one of the ways that people can have Medicaid coverage. And when I talk about Medicaid, I like to talk about it as like a room. There's the Medicaid room, and there are lots of different doors into that room. So there are lots of different ways you can get through a door and into the Medicaid room. And MAPP is one of those doors. So MAPP is one of the ways that you can gain eligibility for Medicaid in the state of Wisconsin. And depending on someone's income, they may have to pay a premium for this coverage. So it says kind of right in the name, it's the purchase plan. So some people do have to purchase their Medicaid coverage, and we'll talk all about that. And stick with me, because maybe you've heard about the premiums before and think or know that they were completely unreasonable, but that's one of those changes we're going to highlight. Really great news about the premiums for most people. All right, so when we think about MAPP, there are kind of four main areas for eligibility, and we're going to go through each of these. So our four main areas that we'll talk a little more in depth about: there's non-financial eligibility, there is a work requirement, there's an asset limit, and income limits. So let's take a look and dive in a little more into each of these. So for non-financial, this is going to be the same as the non-financial eligibility rules for the other types of Medicaid in the state of Wisconsin. You have to be a Wisconsin resident, which means you have to be physically present and you've expressed your intention to stay. You plan to stay here, you plan to live here. It's pretty simple. There's no duration requirement, but you have to be here and say you're going to be here. Someone has to be a US citizen, or some people would be eligible as a qualified immigrant. There are rules about which type of verification and proof someone would have to provide for those things, including maybe a social security card or something like that. This program does require a disability determination. So that would be that formal decision through the Disability Determination Bureau, or DDB. And if someone has a social security benefit already that's related to disability, so either one called SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, or maybe they had SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and they're working more now, that would count to meet that requirement. So you have to have that formal disability determination. If someone does not have that and they want MAPP, they can get it through the county or the consortium, and that would just require an additional application to file with the consortium, and then they could send that through to the DDB to get that formal disability determination. And this program is for adults. So someone has to be 18 years or older in order to qualify for MAPP. There's no cap on age, so someone can be any age as long as they meet the requirements, and they can continue to be eligible for MAPP. All right, we mentioned a work requirement. So this program really is about Medicaid for people who are working, but what does work mean for MAPP, or what meets that work requirement? It's a lot of different things, which is kind of neat. So if someone's an employee, they get they're a waged worker, they work for an agency, that definitely counts to meet that work requirement. And usually when we talk to people about this, we say it's one time per month. So someone has to work at least one time per month in order to meet this requirement. So working for an employer, definitely going to meet that requirement for you. Someone can be self-employed and meet the work requirement for MAPP. Now, if someone's self-employed, it can get a little tricky. You do have to provide a service or sell a product at least once per month to meet that requirement. So I couldn't work 6 months of the year making blankets to get ready to sell them in craft fair season, maybe in the fall. but not sell anything the other parts of the year and have that meet my work requirement. That wouldn't do it. I would have to sell at least one blanket per month or at least one product or service per month to meet that self-employment work requirement. And then there's something called in-kind work. So when someone has work that's in kind, that means it's maybe a less formal work arrangement. I do something that's a service or a value to someone, and they give me cash, shelter, or food in return. So maybe my neighbor works out of the home and I go over there for them a couple times a week and walk their dog, and they pay me in cash. Or my my son needs someone to watch his kids while he's at work, and I watch my grandkids a couple times a week, and they buy me a meal or give me some groceries in return for that. Those would be things that meet that in-kind work requirement. So that's nice that does have some flexibility there. And there are a couple times when someone might not be able to meet that work requirement. So let's say I'm looking for a job and I really need Medicaid, I need health insurance so that I'm healthy enough to have a job. There's something called the Health and Employment Counseling, or HEC program. And HEC is something that I fill out an application, and on that application I say, here's kind of my job goal. Here's how I'm gonna try to achieve that job goal. You know, maybe I'm looking on Indeed once a day, or, you know, what are the steps I'm taking to try to find employment? And I would submit that application to the Department of Health Services, or DHS, and there's a HEC manager there, and that person could approve me, and then I could have MAPP for up to 12 months while I'm looking for work that could meet that work requirement. And one thing right now, just to know, is that during the public health emergency, this work requirement is suspended. So Medicaid is, generally the state is not terminating people's Medicaid or health coverage right now. And so one of the ways that they're accomplishing that is that they're not enforcing that work requirement at this time for the MAPP program. Assets. This is big, and we're going to talk about something even cooler later. But the MAPP program has an asset limit of $15,000. This is significantly higher than what we're used to with Medicaid programs when we talk about those asset limits. Usually we're thinking about keeping things below 2,000. Not the case with the MAPP program. MAPP has up to $15,000 that someone can have in assets. This is also different because it's going to count only the assets of the MAPP recipient. So MAPP is individual coverage, just like all Medicaid programs, or all of the EBD Medicaid programs, individual coverage. So it's just for the recipient. And when they look at assets, if I'm married, but my spouse has assets in just his name, it's not going to count towards my $15,000 limit. However, if we have joint accounts, so we have a saving account that has both of our names on it, they would consider that differently depending on whether or not my spouse also has Medicaid. If my spouse also has Medicaid, our joint account is split down the middle, and half of what's in there would count for me and half would count for him. If he does not have Medicaid, the complete balance of that joint account would count towards my $15,000 limit. So there are some quirky things there, but you know, this $15,000 is really great. Things that are going to generally count would be those checking accounts, savings accounts, cash value on retirement accounts, things like that. What would not count is going to be one vehicle, a home that I own and live in, and generally my household possessions. And then there's something really cool that I kind of alluded to called independence accounts. We'll talk about that in a bit. But this is cool. This $15,000 limit does apply. And if someone has long-term care and they're eligible, they're financially eligible because they have MAPP, they are going to go, they're going to have this $15,000 limit instead of two. So that's very cool. And then there are income limits. So someone does have to have countable or net income below 250% of the federal poverty level for their household size. And so this is a couple things here. When we talk about countable income or net income, that's only about half of someone's earnings. So only about half of my earnings are going to count when they're comparing my income to this 250%. And I forgot to look up 250 for an individual. I'm going to calculate it really quick. So this year, 250% for a household of one is right around $2,683. So again, that's about half of my earnings and almost all of unearned income, which would be income someone gets that's not from working. And if someone is married, they do count a spouse's income when they find countable income. So they would combine earned income, they would combine unearned income, and then they would calculate that net income. Children's income is not going to count here, but that spouse's income will. And the household size then is going to also be based on, you know, if I'm just an individual, I'm applying for MAPP, I would be a household of one. If I'm married, I would be at least a household of two. If I have dependent children, that would increase my household size too. So that 250 I quoted is for one person, but as you add on to that household size, that amount would be larger. So that would be helpful when you're looking at two people's income instead of just the one. One of the changes that happened with the recent MAPP changes is that dependent 18-year-olds can now count in households. Before it was a hard cutoff. As soon as a kid turned 18, they weren't counted in a household for that adult recipient anymore. But now an 18-year-old who is still in high school would count as a dependent 18-year-old, and they would stay in that household size until they're out of high school.
Megan, there was a question about restating those amounts again, so I'm not sure exactly. Nancy, maybe if you want to clarify, just so Megan, there were a lot of amounts there, so I'm not sure which amounts.
Okay, right at the beginning, you stated when you were talking about the 250%, what you were calculating it on your calculator from one person per month.
Yep. So 250% of the federal poverty level for a household of one, so just one person this year, is around $2,683. There's probably some change on there because the state doesn't seem to like to round a whole lot. So it's probably maybe in 32 cents, somewhere around there. But 2,683. Yeah, I'm rattling off a bunch of numbers. I did send an email that has a flyer as well as the PowerPoint. And I'm...
Yep. So the handout is uploaded, and then I'm sure Caitlin will put the PowerPoint link in the chat too.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think the handout, which is just kind of a flyer that summarizes what MAPP is, I think that one has the 2021 250% in there too. You can always look that up on DHS's website, the Department of Health Services. I usually just Google federal poverty level DHS, and it's linked actually or bookmarked on my Google search now because I use it a lot. All right. So we've mentioned a few times now that there have recently been some changes to the MAPP program. And we're kind of in a weird, strange time period with how things changed, but nothing changed because a lot of things are different right now under the public health emergency. But we do know a lot about what the new rules are going, or we know what the new rules are. We don't know how it's going to function quite yet because they haven't had to do it. But starting or effective August 1st of last fall, these MAPP changes were finally implemented, and you can see they're based on Act 59, which passed all the way back in 2017. And so it was a long process, and David is on the phone and joined us this morning because he was really involved, and I'm excited for him to share kind of how that process was and that fight, because that took a lot of work. So David, if you want to.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, I actually, one of the things that I want to discuss today too is, so it was a very long process. It didn't go off without a hitch right away. It actually took about 3 years or 2 years for us to start talking about it. And then, you know, there was a big push between mid 2019 all the way into 2020. But what DHS was really cooperative with the changes that were implemented. And one of the biggest things that I think that we did was those premium changes. I mean, that really helped a lot of people with disabilities, and if they want to earn more money, they can now, and it's actually a good thing. So, but I was on MAPP, and I went off abruptly because of the way that the old premium calculations were dealt with. So I had to, I might be reapplying in the future, but right now I'm just not. But anyway, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has on anything. And, you know, I think there has been a lot of really good changes within this. You know, MAPP has definitely been a real big thing. And I was actually involved with the work group that was implementing these changes. So I know firsthand what was going on and everything, what the thought process was behind everything when we tried to make some of these changes. So it should be it then. So, yeah.
You know, David, and not to put you on the spot here, but I'm wondering, have you, thought about how these changes, will impact you and, or, help you in the future? I mean, especially once, right now, like Megan said, the premiums have been waived, due to the pandemic, but, what benefit will the MAPP changes have for you in the future?
Well, basically, a little bit more flexibility with premiums. I mean, really, basically, that was a big thing. Instead of paying a $300 premium, I'd be looking at a $50 a month premium. So that's a huge difference. And then also, too, with independence accounts, for me, am I kind of upset that, we couldn't get the asset limit increase from 15 to 30,000? That was something that I was really hoping we could do to help a lot of people. But we won't go into that topic today. But yeah, that's just another issue that I had. And a lot of that has to do with, let's just say if somebody were to get an inheritance and suddenly they had to put the money someplace, they would have to open up a trust fund and put the money into a trust fund. They couldn't just put all of it into an ABLE account or a trust fund or any of that stuff. So, but anyway, that's one of the, big things with that. But anyway, right now, this program really can do a lot of good for a lot of people. And I would encourage people to sign up if they aren't already signed up. And there's just a lot of really good things that can happen from this. So,
thank you, David. There's a question
Yep.
for Megan in the chat, which is, was there a change with the counting of unearned income? Can you just clarify that?
Yeah, good question. So there was not a way, they didn't change the way unearned income is counted at eligibility, but absolutely they changed the way it's counted when they calculate premiums. It's a huge change and a huge difference. And we'll look at that because, a lot of people may say, well, I've heard of MAPP before and it's totally unaffordable for me. Or I know someone who paid $400 a month to have their Medicaid. And that is going to be a thing of the past with the way that they now treat unearned income and calculate those premiums.
Well, look at David's situation, going from 300 to 50 or, dollars a month. That's a lot of money in his pocket every month.
Absolutely. And David, thank you for all your work with the advocacy for this. And you guys were really, even though they were being cooperative, you guys were really educating them all along the way. And it was kind of a pick your battles thing, I think. And the changes are really going to be fantastic for a lot of people. And maybe it's just step one. Maybe somewhere down the road, we can change those asset limits and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these changes really help it become a great work incentive. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So great. All right. You have more presentation there?
I do.
We'll let you keep going.
All right. So we're talking about these changes and kind of what are the highlights. So there are some changes that happened, and these are kind of three of the main ones, and we're going to talk in more depth about these second two. But one thing that just as a heads up, they did also add that medical remedial expenses, or MREs, totaling over $500 can be used as a deduction at eligibility. Now, this one's a little tricky because medical remedials would be out-of-pocket costs that someone has for services, supplies, things related to a medical condition. And, once you have Medicaid or MAPP, you might not have that much out of pocket. But what's neat about this is if someone's married, they could apply their spouses. They can total together the medical remedials. And if the applicant plus their spouses is 500 or more, the total amount can be deducted. So that could be helpful if someone has a spouse who maybe isn't getting MAPP. Maybe they're paying health insurance premiums for their own health insurance. And, that can add up. That might be something that would be a deduction and could potentially help someone gain eligibility. And then, as we've mentioned, those changes to the MAPP premium, that was another huge change, and we'll look closer at that in a second. And then, as David mentioned, the independence accounts, huge change here. We'll talk about it a little bit more as well, but the balance of an independence account is now not only excluded as an asset for MAPP, but it's excluded as an asset for any kind of Medicaid that someone might have in the future. So that's a big change, and we'll talk about that. So MAPP premiums, let's dive in. we've been hinting at it. Before August of 2020, some of these premiums were ridiculously unaffordable for people. We're talking, I'd have to sit down with people and say, all right, well, I'm sorry, but if you earn $200 a month, your MAPP premium is $425. And it's not really reasonable to expect someone to want to work and pay more than they're working or pay more than they're earning to have their health insurance. So that was always a bummer, and I hated having those conversations, and there was not much I could do about it. It just was how it was set up. But with the change, they're much more affordable. I won't have to have that conversation anymore with people. And as mentioned, currently and since April of 2020, the MAPP premiums are right now waived or kind of suspended under the public health emergency. I haven't heard anything about when they might restart those or when they might restart the work requirement. I think everyone's going to have a decent, I think we'll get a decent amount of time between when they say they're going to restart and when it restarts. Just knowing that they're going to have to do a whole bunch of reviews to get people's information up to date as well. But right now, no MAPP premiums at all. But when they do restart, it'll be under the new rules. So the new rules are, if I have MAPP, I'm eligible for MAPP, I will pay a monthly premium when I have gross income over 100% of the federal poverty level. So, and it's always going to look at that individual level. This was a change from the previous. They did do some bigger household sizes with premiums in the past, no longer. So it's simplifying it here too. You can say if your gross income, so that means before any taxes are taken out, before any deductions, if gross income in a month is $1,073.33 or more, that's 100% this year, you're going to have a premium for MAPP. And there is a minimum monthly premium, or a base premium, I think is what they call it, of $25. So this is a change, and this could be, so premiums are a lot more affordable, but when premiums restart, there is going to be a group of people who maybe were not paying premiums for MAPP before the public health emergency. And when the rule change starts and premiums are no longer waived, there's going to be a group of people who are now paying or expected to pay at least $25 a month for premium. So that is going to be something that it's not wrong, but it's going to be different for people. So that will be probably a surprise when they start to send those notices out. But let's look at examples, because I've been talking about how it's different. And so Maria, on this one, Maria has $1,200 of gross earned income per month. And she also has that Social Security benefit, the one called SSDI, stands for Social Security Disability Insurance, and her gross monthly payment is $875. So that puts her gross monthly income just above $2,000, right? Almost $2,100. And her monthly MAPP premium is $55, right around there. So that would be an estimated premium of $55. And then Tom, so Tom has a monthly SSDI payment. So this is his unearned income. That's what SSDI is considered, unearned income. And he has an unearned income amount of $1,400. So $1,400 in SSDI. I can tell you that alone probably would have been a $400+ MAPP premium under the old system, okay? So he would have had a pretty good chunk of that he would have had to pay in his premium. And then he earns $600 per month from work. And in this case, He's just at $2,000 for his gross income, and his MAPP premium is $52. So you can see, you know, Maria in the first example would have had a really reasonable premium, or maybe even no premium at all by the time they calculated it. But I'm guessing probably $50 max, 25 maybe under the old system, because her SSDI payment, that unearned income, was smaller. And Tom would have had that $400+ premium. And now you can see their gross income is very similar and their premiums are very similar, even though more of his gross income is from unearned income than Maria's. So, I mean, this is a huge change. It's, I mean, saving him hundreds of dollars per month. That's fantastic. And again, like I mentioned, so that $25 minimum monthly premium is going to be new for some people when that comes to be. And I think the difference is probably $400 to $500 is the difference between where they start calculating premiums now versus the threshold where that used to be. So there's people kind of in that range where they weren't having a premium calculated, and they will be now. There are going to be temporary hardship waivers of the premium. And this is something that's new. And so I can't speculate how these are going to work. You know, how easy it will be to have them approved, how long it will take to have them approved, what circumstances are easier versus more difficult to have them approved. So they just have the information out there about these, but we haven't seen them in process yet because they're not charging premiums right now. So no one's had to file the waiver. But I do have examples that they provided, and they being the Department of Health Services, DHS. So DHS provided some examples for reasons for the temporary hardship waiver. And it would be, these examples are an unusual expense related to someone's health or ability to work that wasn't used to determine eligibility or premium. So if something popped up that was a new or unusual expense, a decrease in work hours, but you still owe a premium. So maybe you were trucking along, had earnings, and suddenly your hours are cut, or you know, your work cuts back, and it means your monthly income is lower, but still above that 100%. That might be a time that you could apply for this waiver. Experiencing temporary transportation or childcare issues that result in less hours of being able to work, or a sudden increase in household expenses like rent, vehicle insurance, utilities, gas, etc. So again, I don't know exactly how this will work. There is a form that someone would have to fill out, and I think the name of the form is ridiculously long. It's temporary waiver of your Medicaid purchase plan premium because of a difficult situation. The form is on the DHS website, so you could look that up. I would Google MAPP hardship waiver premium, and then the DHS website would probably be one of the links, and you could look for that form there. I imagine you could probably also request it from the Income Maintenance Consortium as well. And then it does say Income Maintenance has up to 30 days from the submission to review and make a decision. And they can also request that the hardship is verified. Again, I don't know how they're going to ask for those verifications or what they would want to see for verification. But it's just, like I said, it's kind of a strange time with Medicaid overall, and then having these changes put into effect right in the middle of it. Some of it's just wait and see, unfortunately. But just know that that is an option, that is something that's out there that people may be able to take advantage of, is that hardship waiver. I'm just going to pause for a second and see if any questions came in about premiums.
Nope, nothing in the chat. Is there anything on the Facebook page, Sally?
No, not that I see.
Okay, sounds good. I'll keep moving along. All right, so independence accounts. We've thrown this around a little bit as well. So what are they? These are really cool, and this is something that's always been in the MAPP program, but they did make some changes to it with the change that started in August. But an independence account is a way for someone to save additional money and have additional savings that will not count towards that $15,000 asset limit. There are rules about how much can be saved in independence accounts. Someone can save up to 50% of their gross earnings amount per year in an independence account. So if I'm making $1,000 gross per month, that's $12,000 gross per year. I could save up to $6,000 in my independence account. There are penalties if I save more than my 50% of my annual earnings in there. But, you know, so that's just something to keep an eye on. And so it's a really cool opportunity, but you do have to just make sure you're, you know, paying attention and keeping track of that rule. You can't have an independence account that's a joint account, so it does have to be solely owned by the MAPP recipient. There's no restrictions on how you spend your money in an independence account. This is different than a lot of the savings options we talk about, having specific rules about how money can be spent. But that's not the case with independence accounts. Spend it however you want, which is really neat. It does have to be registered with the Income Maintenance Agency, or IM. So the account registration form is this F10121, and I linked to that in the DHS website. I don't know if links will work on my PowerPoint PDF, but I did share the direct link to that as well. In the world of applications, it's a really simple one. It's about 2 pages, and you're really just filling out the information about that account so that income maintenance can identify it and recognize it as your independence account, because you don't need approval. You just need them to have it kind of flagged. So when you're reporting your accounts and assets and things, they're like, oh, yep, we know about that one. That's the independence account. What's kind of neat is retirement accounts can be independence accounts as well. So if I'm in MAPP and I register a retirement account as an independence account, that could help me out and kind of keep that balance from counting as an asset for me. And so I lost my train of thought a little bit there, but so let's see what's on my next slide, because we're still so someone needs to make sure their account is registered before they start making up deposits, because like with that retirement account, or if I have a bank account, I want to be an independence account, the balance before it's registered is always going to count as an asset. So you don't want to open an account and start saving with the intention of it being an independence account before registering it. So get that account registered before you're making your deposits. And then any deposits made to that registered independence account during periods of MAPP eligibility, so when you have MAPP, is going to be excluded as an asset for MAPP. And then the huge change that the advocates were able to get through that is fantastic is that also the exempt portion is going to be exempt as an asset for all other Medicaid programs. This is huge because, like we talked about, those other Medicaid programs have $2,000 limits. And so, like, let's think about long-term care. If I need long-term care and maybe I've been financially eligible because I have MAPP, but I can't work anymore or I don't want to work anymore. If I used to have an independence account that was excluded from MAPP purposes, I was stuck. Let's say I had $20,000 in my independence account. It didn't count against my MAPP limit, but then I don't have MAPP anymore. They used to turn around and say, well, if you want to be in long-term care group B now and pay your cost share, you need to have less than $2,000 in assets. This independence account is too much. But now that independence account is also excluded for any other kind of Medicaid. So this is great. That really kind of opens some doors to have some flexibility to have those savings and not worry about what it's going to mean down the road. And so, you know, we've talked about the work requirements waived right now, the premiums waived right now. And in some situations, I've seen the consortium is not moving people from one kind of Medicaid to another, even when they aren't eligible for the kind they're technically qualifying in. And so I would say if you want to start doing the independence account, because there's nothing that says you can't have one right now. You can absolutely do an independence account right now, but you have to be MAPP eligible. So it may take a call to the consortium to say, can you enroll me in MAPP? I want an independence account. Because even if you're newly working and, you know, maybe you should have shifted Medicaid programs, you might not have. So that's just kind of my pro tip right now is to, if you want to start an independence account, which you absolutely can, there's no rule saying that these are like on hold or anything. Making sure you follow up with your consortium and make sure that you're open in that MAPP category so that you can register an account and start saving. And speaking of the consortium, so MAPP is a state of Wisconsin Medicaid program. So the eligibility and determinations and ongoing reviews are done through those income maintenance agencies or IM consortium. And so to have MAPP, you have to apply with your local IM agency. Applications can be done online, over the phone, or on, they do have paper applications you could print and then mail or fax in. They used to maintain office hours where people were supposed to be able to come apply in person. I suspect that's not happening right now. I don't know for certain. But really that online application is a pretty slick tool. And over the phone is not too bad either. Generally, if you're applying over the phone, they are probably going to mail you some forms that they'd want you to follow up and fill out and send back for some of those verifications. But it's not too bad either. Someone who's already eligible for Medicaid and already has that case open with the consortium, they may be kind of automatically, under normal circumstances, automatically switched into the MAPP program when they would call and report that they're working. That could just be something that happens because suddenly your income puts you in the category where MAPP is your best or kind of only option. So it's kind of fluid in that case because, you know, the responsibility is to report to the consortium when your income changes. And so if you called to say, hey, I started a job, you might get switched into MAPP just because that's where your eligibility screens at that point. And again, may or may not be happening right now due to the fact that in the public health emergency, I think, don't quote me on it, but I think that they're only terminating healthcare if you explicitly tell them you want them to end it, if a member moves out of state, or if someone passes away. I think those are the only 3 ways that they're terminating coverage at this point. So Medicaid should continue, but as we think about moving forward, MAPP is a really great option to keep in mind. And that's kind of what I have prepared for today. So thank you guys for having me. And what questions do you have?
I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Sally, is there anything on Facebook? And then also, for those of you on Zoom, you certainly can unmute and ask Megan your questions.
Yeah, no, there was a question from someone that on the Facebook, but I emailed her separately because it was more of a benefits question that so if you're still watching, I emailed you separately. So.
Okay, great. Anyone?
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
It does look like there's a question. How do those work with those using ABLE accounts?
Already.
So I think that can be a good question.
The independence accounts?
So yeah, I don't know, Nancy, maybe unmute and ask, because that could be.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Nancy.
I'll just turn on my video too. So can they have an ABLE account and an independent account? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I don't know why there would be any restriction on that.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything. Someone could even have several accounts registered as independence accounts.
Okay.
It's just kind of the rule about those independence accounts is you can only deposit up to half of gross annual earnings amount in any of them. So if I had 5 of them, that doesn't bump up my limit.
Okay.
And then, the ABLE accounts have limits on how much can be contributed annually too.
Right.
But yeah, there's nothing that says you can't have both.
I'm going to follow up to that question. To be eligible for it, you have to be, you were talking about the employment part of it, the self-employed in kind. If someone's in an employment training program, I think you mentioned that there's like a thing you could apply for 12 months. If you're looking for work, is that considered part of that if it's a training program that they're not getting any income?
Yeah. That are those training programs usually, I mean, hopefully the goal is within a year you'd have some paid employment.
Yes.
So yeah, that could definitely work. The one thing I would be kind of cautious about is if you're in that, it's called HEC or Health and Employment Counseling. If you're in that program, you've been approved, and so you have that up to 12 months while you're looking for work. Okay. If I get a temporary job where I do get paid for a period of time, that would be considered work, and that could end my HEC period. And then if it was temporary, there are rules about how often I can use HEC. So it might be then a mad scramble to say like, well, let's make sure you have something that's in kind set up when that ends, or hopefully it turns into long-term employment. So that would be my only caution, is if there's work in there that is paid, that might kind of interfere with that HEC period, because it would switch you over to traditional MAPP because you'd meet that work requirement.
Okay.
But then if it ended and you were looking again, you might have some trouble restarting the HEC period.
So does it make sense for someone who's already just regularly getting Medicaid to even switch over to MAPP if they're? not currently making an income?
right? If they're currently eligible for Medicaid,
Okay,
you know, it might be worth waiting until they do have that
okay.
income from work that's going to be more consistent. You know, if they do have that temporary job, in that case, they might get switched into MAPP for the 3 months that they're on that job. And then when it ended, they might go back into their regular Medicaid that they're in without the work income. So it's funky because it's kind of fluid.
Okay, thank you.
Need to,
Yep.
you know, have, if you are on benefit programs and you're working or looking to go to work, to have access to a work incentive benefit specialist. Yeah, and don't you think, Megan, that's kind of the most important thing, I think, to understand all of this, is if it seems like an attractive option, you know, or you want to learn more, I guess. Where do people find out more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So work incentive benefit specialists are really able to help somebody think about their Medicaid eligibility, including MAPP, estimating potential premiums when those restart, and kind of running people through these types of scenarios. And there are a couple ways to get the benefits counseling service. If someone's working with DVR, it is an option that they can ask for, and then DVR would be able to provide a list of providers of the service in that area, and the person can choose. If someone is not connected with DVR, long-term care, IRIS, or family care is able to pay for some benefits counseling, the work incentive benefits counseling. That's a service that they can pay for as somebody's thinking about work, even kind of that pre-employment. And then somebody who's not connected with anything, there's a program called WIPA. It stands for Work Incentives Planning and Assistance. And there's a statewide phone number for that. And I do not know it off the top of my head. It's an 800 number, but I can look it up.
I can look it up too and add it. It's WIPA.
Thank you.
Is that how it is? WIPA.
Yep, WIPA.
Okay.
And all of those services are going to be free to the individual. So, you know, someone's paying, whether it's DVR, long-term care. In the WIPA program, it's a Social Security funded program, but not the individual themselves. So there are options for someone to have benefit counseling that's not going to cost them out of pocket to have this information.
All right. I'm just looking for the WIPA thing. Well, I see it on your webpage, so I'm going to link that.
Yep, and currently ERI holds the contract in the
Oh,
state of
you
Wisconsin.
are the WIPA. Okay.
Yep. Yep. So
All
you
right.
got it.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. I don't see any other questions in the chat or on the Facebook. Any others before we close it up? We always try to end by noon, so. It was a great presentation. I learned something every time you guys come and do this presentation. So we really appreciate it. We will have this up on our YouTube channel. We'll get it on our BPDD YouTube channel, so you can look for it there. You can also rewatch it on our Facebook page. So thanks for joining us this week. Next week, we will be talking about mental health. To celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you everybody for joining us.